You've heard the term everywhere, right? Large language models, or LLMs. It seems like they're changing everything. So let's pull back the curtain and demystify this whole thing. We're going to break down exactly what they are, how they actually work, and most importantly, what it all means for you and me.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big picture. What even is a language model? Then, we're going to peek inside that black box to see how the magic happens. After that, we get really practical. We'll talk about the art of prompting, how to talk to an AI to get what you want. We'll weigh the pros and cons of using the cloud versus your own machine. And finally, we'll get into the really important stuff, the risks and our responsibilities.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. To really get a handle on large language models, we've got to start with a much bigger and honestly a much fuzzier concept.
What is AI? I mean, really, we hear that acronym all the time. The simplest way to think about it is as a giant umbrella. It covers any device or program that can sort of, act like a human to get something done. It's a massive field, and LLMs? They're just one very new, very powerful part of it. Okay, so here's the absolute key. An LLM is a type of AI, but its main job is, believe it or not, pretty simple. It's basically an incredibly advanced autocomplete. It's been trained on a mind-boggling amount of text, like a huge portion of the internet, and it's learned the patterns of how we talk and write. So its core function isn't really to think or understand, it's just to make an extremely educated guess about what word should come next. And that leads to this brilliant kind of spooky idea of a stochastic parrot. Now, stochastic is just a fancy way of saying random or probabilistic. So, just like a parrot can repeat words perfectly without having a clue what they mean, an LLM pieces together sentences based on what's most likely to come next. It has no idea if what it's saying is true or false, it just knows what sounds right. And that, right there, is why they can hallucinate and just make stuff up with total confidence. Okay, so if they're just glorified next word predictors, how on earth are they so good? How do they write code and poetry and emails? Well, let's try to peek inside that black box. It's not so much magic as it is some really clever math. This one sentence from a research paper back in 2017 changed everything. Seriously, it introduced a new kind of architecture called the transformer, and its secret weapon was a mechanism called attention. This is what allows the model to figure out which words in a sentence are the most important to understand the overall context. It was a total game changer. So here's a super simplified version of how it works. First, the encoder takes your input, let's say a sentence, and turns it into a bunch of numbers the computer can work with. Then, that attention mechanism kicks in, weighing which words are most relevant to each other. Finally, the decoder looks at all that information and starts building the output, generating it one single word at a time. Let's make that real.
Let's say we feed the model this simple German phrase, Die Katze sitzt, which means the cat sits. The model has read this, turned it into numbers, and is now ready to start translating. What do you think the very first English word is going to be?
Well, the model runs the probabilities. Based on the German word die and everything it's learned, it calculates, say, a 90% chance the next word is the, and maybe a 10% chance it's a. No contest, right? It picks the.
And here's where it gets cool. It does the whole thing over again. But this time, it's not just looking at the original German. It's also looking at the word it just wrote, the. With that new context, it calculates a 90% chance the next word is cat and a teeny tiny 0.01% chance it's dog. So it picks cat, and it just keeps doing that, over and over, building the sentence word by word. That's it. That's the engine. So now that we kind of get how they think, we can get way better at talking to them. It's not just about asking a question, it's about giving the right instructions. This is what people call prompt engineering, or, the art of the prompt.
If you want to level up your results, a framework like Prepare can be a huge help. Start with a clear prompt, give it a role to play, act as an expert marketer. Be explicit, tell it exactly what you need. Set the parameters like write in a friendly tone or format this as a bulleted list. Now, here are 2 pro tips. Ask it to ask you questions if it needs more clarity, and you can even ask it to rate its own response at the end. Following these steps can take your results from meh to wow.
Okay, so you know how to talk to an LLM now, but where is that conversation actually taking place? This leads us to a really fundamental choice that we all have to make every time we use one. Are you using a model that's running on some giant server in the cloud, or is it running locally, right on your own machine?
And there are some major trade-offs. On one hand, you have the cloud models. They're super convenient, you can access them from anywhere, and you get to use the biggest, most powerful models out there, often for free. But, and this is a big but, your data is being sent to someone else's computer, and it might be used to train their future AIs. On the other hand, running a model locally gives you total privacy and control. Your data never leaves your computer. The catch? You need a pretty beefy computer, and the models are usually a bit smaller and less powerful. It really boils down to convenience versus privacy.
And you know what? Running these things yourself is getting easier every day. There's this whole world of free open source programs like Llama, GPT-4All, and LM Studio that let you download and play with all kinds of models right on your own laptop or desktop.
And that brings us to our last, and honestly, our most critical section. This technology is incredibly powerful, and with great power, well, you know the rest. We have to talk about the risks and what it means to use AI wisely.
I mean, it's a fair question, right? What could possibly go wrong? Well, we already talked about hallucinations, the AI just making stuff up. But imagine that in a scientific paper or a legal document. It becomes a massive problem for things like integrity and making sure results can be reproduced by others.
I love this way of thinking about it. Using an LLM is a lot like hiring a human expert. In both cases, your core duty is exactly the same. You have to understand what it's giving you, you have to question it, and you have to double-check the results. But look at that top line, accountability. With a human, you share the responsibility. With an LLM, it is 100% on you.
And this all ladders up to some bigger ethical ideas we really need to keep in our back pockets. Every time we use one of these tools, we should be asking, could this cause harm? Who's responsible if it messes up? Is it being fair? And is it respecting things like my privacy? Being a smart AI user means being a critical and responsible AI user. And let's just end on this thought. After all the incredible technology, all the math, all the data, it all comes down to a very simple, very human idea: trust. Because if we can't trust these systems to be reliable, to be private, to be fair, then what's the point? That's why understanding how they work, not just that they work, is more important now than ever. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.